and welcome back to another episode of Tea Time with Mother and Crone. We got a lot of interesting things to talk about, but first, we got to figure out what's in our cup. So, Melinda, could you tell us what I'm drinking in my cup tonight?
Yes, tonight we have stinging nettle. Stinging nettle is good for a lot of different things. As with anything, you always want to check with your doctor first. It can have side effects with some medications that you're taking. Some of the things that I read are like diuretics, blood pressure medications. So just, always ask. Also, if you're pregnant, it can induce contractions. So just, be careful. Some interesting things. So it's nettle or stinging nettle is a shrub that comes from Northern Europe, North America, and Asia. Scientific name is Urtica dioica. The botanists are going to hurt me for that one. The plant boasts pretty heart-shaped leaves and yellow or pink flowers, but the stem is covered in tiny stiff hairs that release stinging chemicals when touched, which is why it's stinging nettles. Now, if you touch these, it will cause skin irritation to human touch. So you have to be careful when you're handling them. And a lot of gardeners actually will pull them up as weeds. They think that they're weeds because they do look like weeds. They can get very tall. Now, stinging nettle has been used for over 2,000 years, which I found was very interesting. I didn't realize it was such an old herbal plant, as a powerful spring tonic for joint health and overall wellness. And many traditional cultures would forage for the greens and prepare it in food, which I found was interesting. So what you can do is you can blanch the leaves. You can also dry the leaves or cook them down. And when you do that, the nettles will lose their sting.
Oh, I was going to ask how that worked because that would be interesting.
Yes, they'll lose their sting. And when you eat it, you can use you can use it in pestos, pastas, soups, and it's really good. It's a good source of vitamin A and calcium. And you can also, it also mentioned that Hippocrates' idea of using food as an herbal medicine, he actually had nettle as one of the ideas. So it gives a deeper meaning, nettle specifically, because you can use it in food as herbal medicine. The author was saying that Hippocrates' idea of using food as medicine, nettle was a good example for that. An interesting thing also about nettle is that you can use it for cordage or making rope. So what indigenous people would do is, and you can still do it today for like survivalists or camping or whatever, you can actually take the branches, you can, rip them out of the dirt. And then, of course, you want to have gloves and strip the leaves off. What you do is you break the branches in half. And I actually saw a 6-minute YouTube video. You can YouTube it and learn how to do it. You break the branches in half. And then what you do is you peel the bark, the fibers of the bark. And it's almost like a paper, like a leathery paper. The skin is basically what you're peeling. And you let it dry. And it's very, very strong. So when it dries, you can actually braid the cords, and it's a very tight rope that you can use for different things. So if you're making like shelter or, whatever you need, bandages, whatever you might need to tie off, it's been used for that for hundreds of years. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that really is.
I know. And some of the really good medical benefits for nettle, it helps with urinary tract health. It also helps with allergies, which is one of the reasons why I drink it. It was actually recommended to me by my cousin. She actually was very nice enough to send me a big bag of organic nettle tea when I was having a huge bout of allergies. And she uses it and it helps a lot. It also helps treating muscle and joint pain, and it can also help strengthen bones. It's also good for skin irritation like eczema and acne. It helps reduce redness and swelling, and also soothes itching and speeds up the healing. So I thought that was interesting. And it also boosts heart health and helps lower blood pressure. But again, if you're on medications, you want to always check. And as far as the magical properties, so the association for nettle magically would be planet Mars, masculinity, fire, Aries, Scorpio, and Libra being the zodiacs. The attributes would be that it's good for binding, courage, healing, protection, and banishing, if that's your thing. So I thought that was really cool. A lot of cool stuff.
It amazes me when you start looking at the magical versus medicinal purposes of a lot of the plants and herbs. They actually, like, if it's for healing, it's a natural herb that heals, and protection, it promotes good health. So it's almost like they mirror each other.
Yes, exactly. And I just could not get over when I saw the thing about the cording. I was like, what? Wait a second. I gotta find out about this. So I did. I watched a little 6-minute video, and I saw the guy. He actually uprooted them and did the whole thing, and I was like, wow, that's really neat.
See, and that reminds me like of hemp, marijuana, the hemp plant. They made ropes out of it for years and years and years. They
Oh
said,
yeah, you can do so many. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
and they were like, it was the strongest rope around.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, a lot of plants have medicinal and actual food, because you got to eat it sometimes for food.
Right.
And a lot of different, like, you don't just use the plant for one thing. You use the leaves for this, the flowers for this, the bark for this. I mean, it's almost like we encompass it if we do it correctly.
Exactly. So I thought that was a good one. And I also did find out about Blackthorne from last week's show. So it is native to Europe and Asia, and also it did mention Iran. So one of the sources said it is not native to North America. Another one did say it may be found in North America, but if so, it would be the Northeast like we had thought.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So so it's still, the jury was kind of out, but that was the only source that had mentioned North America. Everything else that I saw, it seemed like no go for North America.
Well,
So
it might be one of those things that might have been brought over and they didn't know if it propagated.
yeah, and one of the things it did say, it's very difficult to bring over from England. It did mention it's found in the UK more so than anywhere else, but France, Asia, Eastern Asia. So I did want to follow up on that. I'm still working on the dates for the fairy tribe.
That's interesting though, because a lot of the plants that we have in America we think are native are not.
Mhm.
So, and like the hawthorn is a cousin to the blackthorn, which means our hawthorn might be the American blackthorn
Right.
because it produced and grew here. Because sometimes when you bring a plant from one area to the other, it changes the plant. So it becomes a little bit different than the original plant it came from.
Exactly. And if anyone out there wants to look it up, if you find something called sloe, SLOE, that is the same. It's another term for blackthorn, which is the same plant or tree that we were discussing last week. So
Is that there's an alcohol called slow. Is that, it's called a
oh,
slow gin fizz.
Oh, no, sure. Maybe maybe it's derived from that. Oh, that would be interesting. You have to research that now.
the berries. I'm just thinking the berries because a lot of times like pokeberries and things were used
Right,
to flavor alcohol. Now it's all done artificially.
right.
But
That would be interesting to find out.
I'll have to look at that.
Mhm.
Shows you how old I am. That's a very old drink. Had to bring that one up.
That's
Well,
right.
we've all had fun with Ostera and kind of sort of glad holidays are over. You get a gone over feeling. But April is holiday free. So that gears us up for Beltane. So start saving all your energy now in your little jars for Beltane.
You'll need it. You'll need it.
Yes. So we will next month start going in April. We're going to start talking a little bit about Beltane and especially how to talk over it with your children and explain it to your children in a way that they will understand.
Exactly.
Because it's a fertility holiday, we get it, but you still have to have the children understand a little bit about the heritage behind it. So we're going to have some of that, a little bit more of the lore and some really fun, silly facts about it, because if we can't have fun with it, nobody else can.
Right, exactly.
So we'll be talking about that. And again, like we do it a little bit every month, so you guys get a handle what's going on. But we were talking earlier what we were going to do for today's show, because there's a lot of things going on right now. People are starting to come out of hibernation, and a lot of the states have lessened their restrictions, and things are starting. I don't want to say normal because we never had normal. Normal is a fallacy, but things are getting back somewhat to where they were, and all of a sudden people are now starting to get back out, and it's like, oh, we're meeting people again that we haven't seen for a while.
Mhm.
And you're on Zoom with them, but you still have you have a mask for every occasion. So you have that mask when you're talking to them. Now you've got to see them in real life.
Mhm.
And the big buzzword I'm seeing now is everybody wants to do shadow work before we all get back out into society.
Right.
And I just thought that was interesting to bring up shadow work, because that's not a subject that's really brought up a lot in the path. I mean, you're told to work on yourself, but a lot of different paths really don't go over that as well.
Right.
So it's kind of one of those things. What's the Michael Jackson song, Man in the Mirror? It's kind of that thing. Just
Exactly.
take a look at yourself, do a little housekeeping work.
Mhm.
I know when I used to teach it to my groups, they were always a little, "Ooh, we're going to do this." And we normally pick the dark moon to do it on during a dark moon ritual, divination, or a lot of it was let's pick something we want to work on ourselves,
Right.
So we prep everybody before they get to the ritual, so they kind of know, what they're going to do. But I've seen a lot of what do I want to call them? Expressions of
Mhm.
what shadow work is. I'm trying to be nice. I really am. Doesn't work well. Um, and I was just trying to get what I think is shadow work. I'm not quite so sure I'm on the same page with a lot of people that are talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think with 2020 and the whole boom of witch talk, and even they're making, I think, I can't remember which brand did it at the moment, but even like a fashion show where they were doing it with the tarot cards. I mean, everything, they're doing everything like so mainstream, and doing little kits of like smudge stick, they're making everything so commercialized. And so with shadow work being like the buzzword, I mean, I think we talked about before, it's good that people are becoming more aware. Yes, it is good to moonbathe, and it is good to go earthing and walk barefoot on the earth, and it is good to journal, all of these things that we've known for so long, and now it's more mainstream, and we're being told that these are good things. So it's kind of, shadow work is kind of in that category, because it's a buzz, people are just throwing it around there. which is fine. It's good to build that awareness, but you have to really understand what that means. And you have to understand that it's hard work to face your faults and your, traumas and everything that goes on and clear out all of that stuff. I mean, it's not easy stuff that you have to, come to terms with. And it's not just, but that's how you grow. And, it's just one of those things. If you're doing, just like the whole if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, then you're not really doing the work. You know what I mean? In my opinion, that's kind of how I feel about it. If you're doing it to be cool, then you don't really care about what it really, you know,
Yeah,
can do.
it's like the latest fashion, you put it on for
Right.
that
It's
period
like
of time.
you're doing it because it's trendy, which is not for the right reason. So, I mean, it really just depends. And, it has to deal with ego, which a lot of people don't want to admit they have. And they'll, point the fingers at everyone else saying that they have ego. But it's like that whole you have finger pointing, but you got three pointing back at you type of thing. It's like, and people, it's hard to admit, when you're wrong, even like with an argument or whatever. And, it's taken a lot of work, to get to that point. So it really just depends. Like I said, if you're doing it as like a trendy thing and like, look at me, I'm cool, I'm working on, working on myself, you really have to dig down and break yourself open in order to grow. And don't make excuses for your, you know, shortcomings and not showing up. And you have to just own it, own your mistakes, be an adult about it, and, move on and grow from it.
I kind of see it as there's a commercial on TV about it's a Fitbit. She has it on her dog and she's throwing the ball and she's like, I've got my 5,000 steps in.
Why did
Um,
I think of that?
you hear a lot of buzzwords, and I've been around for a while, so I've heard a few of them,
Right.
and it's like a cyclical thing.
Hmm.
Figure the wheel of the year, but it goes in cycles where it's brought up and it's cool, and then it's not, and then different words like Carl, and you can pronounce it Jung or Young.
Right.
Was the psychologist. Um, he kind of started talking about your dark side, your Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde,
Right.
and that's when those terms really started to come to the medical field and to the psychology field. So they started talking about it. But I was like, I'm on quite a few different forums, so I read some of them, and you're just sitting there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this has got to be two teenagers talking about shadow work, like,
Right. Right.
and I am sitting here, and I find out it's not, which is like, oh,
So like,
sorry, yeah, it's just the pop culture. We tend to cling on to something. And I'm seeing this is coming out of this COVID a little bit more. It's been a year.
mhm,
We've experienced great things in 1 year, tons of stress. And I'm like, okay, are we going to be like the butterfly in the cocoon and now we're emerging as butterfly?
right.
Or are we trying to make up for the deficit that this year has caused?
Right. Right.
Now, I did do a little research on this. I thought it was an interesting, of course, with the psychology background, when I saw, Carl's name out there, I had to, read that article really quick and look at it. Um, the scary part of all of this is shadow work is something that is very, very deep, like you said, very, very personal. And it's like, oh my goodness, like you're tackling your worst critic yourself.
Right.
So it is a good thing to do. I mean, that's what they've been saying for years. We need to look at that and how do we take that? Because we are not black and white, we are mixed. And how do we take, like, if you have a passion for something or you're angry, you take that anger, you turn it into a passion to do something kind of scenario. And I'm wondering if coming out of this, you know, year that we've been through, and with the death and everything that's tied into it, if the shadow work isn't a type of death. We're trying to shed ourselves.
I would agree with that just because I myself am a visual person and I connect very much to animal medicine just naturally. So the way that I kind of picture it is like shedding of skin, like when a snake sheds their skin, or like when you see the tarantula shedding its skin, or the crab going into, shedding its shell, or going into a new shell. That's kind of how I look at it, because you're still your body, but you're shedding layers of yourself. So that's kind of like how I look at it, because it's always going to be an ongoing process. It's not going to be like, okay, did my shadow work, done for the rest of my life. No, that's not how it works. You're going to go through trials and lessons. People are going to push your buttons. You're going to have your feelings hurt and your heart broken for various different reasons. You know what I mean? It's not a one and done. So that's kind of how I do look at it, is sort of a shedding of the skin, like a growth process. And so when you outgrow this skin and you do shadow work and you learn this lesson, you shed that skin, you move on to the next phase, and you kind of go up. And so that is actually how I look at life in general as a process.
Yeah, it's a process. It's just amazing that I was reading and I thought, during this time, people were worried about not being able to get to church and losing their spirituality, which does happen. I mean, I'm not, you lose what you don't use.
Right.
But they found Zoom like everybody else did. And a lot of this has been wonderful, especially for a lot of people who couldn't get out prior to this.
Exactly.
Now they've got all the churches on Zoom. You can sit at home, because there are a lot of infirmed older Americans that love church but can't get there because they're in some way unable to do it.
Right.
But I'm seeing a lot of the people are now starting to really question what's going on in the world, what's going on spiritually with the world. And there's been comments made that although the church numbers did fall that way, they did build up online.
Right.
So this shadow work is kind of like coming out. And I've seen it, and I've been surprised by the forums I've seen it on, because they're mostly one of them was a strictly Christian forum, and they're talking shadow work, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, let me sit down for this.
Right.
But they're not calling, they were calling it in self depth or something along that line. Not shadow work, but as soon as you read it, you know it was shadow work.
Right. Right.
And I'm wondering if this is not just us reaching out after going through all of what we've been through in the last year, just a way of let's look at ourselves now. The world's changed. Let's see what we can change.
Exactly. Well, and a lot of things, like, we don't realize as adults, no matter how old you are, we don't realize subconsciously how we hold on to childhood trauma that we don't have healed, that we have not worked through. And it's very important, because that sometimes shapes who we are as adults, and the way we view things, and the way we interact with other adults, and how we choose relationships that we have with people, and what we will tolerate with our relationships with other people, is what we see and was brought up around. All of that is kind of tied in together. So it's also very important that you come to terms with things like that, whether you had a great childhood or not so great childhood or whatever. If that is something, make sure that it's not something, because I've known people like this. Don't brush it aside and say, oh, well, that was 1,000 years ago, I'm fine, it's whatever. Sometimes you have to really sit in it and realize, wow, this really still is breaking my heart deep down. And that's what shadow work really, really is. It's resurfacing all of that stuff that you've suppressed, and all of the stuff that you thought you've gotten rid of even. And it's really just getting to the core and just clearing all of that stuff out. Because I've come across so many people that are like, oh, I don't have, that's done and over with, and I don't deal with that. And I've even gone through that. And it's one of those things, it's just like, you have to forgive and deal with that part of it too. So it's not necessarily just dealings as an adult. Sometimes you have to go way, 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 way back and understand sometimes the root starts way, 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 way back. So,
Now, see, I like your description of shadow work. You're not talking about necessarily the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, looking at our bad side. You're talking about going back and looking at trauma and anything that's more or less unbalanced you at one time or another.
well, I think so the way that I look at it, I think it all correlates. I think the trauma can create, Dr. Jekyll, yeah, and Mr. Hyde. You know what I mean? Because I think depending on the type of people that we are, that can depend on the type of reactions that we have and the type of, depending on how much work that we've done spiritually and on ourselves. I think that sort of is what determines how much are we Dr. Jekyll versus Mr. Hyde in certain circumstances. So I think if you don't heal some of those things, that can sort of determine the outcome of where you stand on that spectrum. So I think it's sort of a holistic sort of, I think that's
the whole thing, rather than someone's angry all the time, they're dealing with their anger. Well, let's go back to the problem that started the anger.
Right. That's how I look at it.
Okay, because a lot of people don't look at shadow work like that. Like I said, I have seen some descriptions that are just baffling to my mind. And then others that I think by looking at it as Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and that's it, I think people are losing, like you said, the reason behind, okay, I'm angry, I've got a bad temper. Well, I'll use that to, when I get angry, I like to clean. So that's how I'm going to get rid of my anger. Instead of going back to say, well, why are you angry?
Exactly. Because I think, like I said, to me, I think it's holistic because while I'm angry, I'm going to dance it off and clean. That's a healthy way of responding to the anger. But if you don't figure out why you're angry, then you're just going to keep getting angry and dancing and vacuuming. You know what I mean? It's good that you have a healthy response, but you're just going to keep going back to that place unless you get to the root of it and try to resolve it and at least come to terms with it to where you can move on from it, or at least come to a place where you're at peace with it and you don't have to hold on to that burden. And I actually found a few prompts actually for shadow work. So we talked about journaling. So this is some journaling prompts that might help you with shadow work. And this goes exactly with what we were just saying. So one of the examples is, while reflecting on my childhood, what makes me extremely angry or sad to this day? So you can think about some, and I can think of a couple. Another one, my absolute dream life. How does my perfect day begin? Do I handle my feelings in a healthy and constructive way? And when you do these journal prompts, don't just immediately write it down. Really, really sit and think about the answer. Think about instances like this one, for example. Do I handle my feelings in a healthy and constructive way? Really sit down, think about your relationships that you have with several people, not just like your best friend, and think about, honestly, the thing with shadow work is you have to be hardcore honest with yourself or it will not work. You have to admit your faults and your downfalls and your shortcomings, or it's not going to work. So you have to be honest with yourself. Are you dealing with your feelings in a healthy and constructive way? And if you're not, you have to come to terms with that and you have to figure out a way to do that. And that's the hard part. If that's what makes shadow work not so easy breezy. But another one is, do I project certain aspects of myself onto others? Boy, I know there's a lot of that going on. We've all been guilty of that, I'm sure, at least a time or two. Did my parents provide me with everything I needed? What makes me really angry and why? Would I describe my childhood as happy? What is it that makes me sad? What do I consider the most challenging for me? Have I forgiven myself?
Oh, that's a
Have,
good one.
yeah. Have I forgiven all the people who ever hurt me? So that sort of goes back. So, and this is just, I mean, you can find these anywhere. Um, and this is, what am I addicted to? How have I been ignorant? What projects haven't I finished? So, I mean, they don't have to always be super, super deep, even what projects haven't I finished? Because then are you procrastinating? Then you'll be stagnant. Then it can affect you in other areas of your life. So it may not seem like a super significant question or not a super deep question, but you have to really be open-minded and sort of look at the big picture. What toxic people should I distance myself from? Am I a victim of trauma? Have I done enough to heal? So that's another good one. What are my deepest fears? What lessons do I still need to learn? Am I truly healthy? What are my delusions? How have I been distracting myself? Now, that's a really good one because something that I saw recently was being busy all the time, which in our culture and society, we're very good at that. And I'm super guilty of that. But it was something, and I can't remember where I saw it. It was something about being busy being overly busy, like busy all the time, is a way of distracting ourselves from like trauma. It's a way of distracting ourselves from just being still. Because then if we're still, we have time to think about things. If we're still, we have a chance to relax. We have a chance to think. We have a chance, you know what I mean? So it's like, but we have to remember self-care, like we've talked about before. But those are some really good examples of journal prompts. So I wanted to share those because it can go from one spectrum to the other and.
And it's a little bit of everything. A lot of people, since we've been cooped up, your stressors are now like raw nerves because everything's happening. You had your kids home, you didn't know if you were going to get them on a computer or if the computer would work. I mean, all I can say is thank goodness my already out of school because I would have probably went crazy.
Yeah, that was a rough.
Yes, and finding sitters and places for your kids to go because you got to go to work.
Or how about when a daycare just randomly closes without notice?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are stressors that are absolutely crazy. And I think what's happening more because we did have this downtime. We have had more quiet time that you did a little bit more soul searching or journaling, a little bit more for you time because with all the stressors that were going on, and trust me, it was crazy everywhere. To have that little bit of, okay, I need to calm down. I need to settle.
Mhm.
Now that's great for the people that got to stay home or got to, work from home remote. Those of us who did not miss a day and who have had to be on the front lines, it was a little different for us. Our stressors were really ramped up. And people staying home started after the first month or two going a little, stir crazy because you're not used to it. We are always busy. You said it perfectly. We are always busy. Now, you've gone from on the go mom up at 6, get the kids ready for school, drop them off, go to school, after school events, got to cook dinner, and you're getting to bed at what, 10, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're getting up at 6.
Mhm.
And all of that is going on. Well, for those who no longer had that activity and got stuck, the stressors were just the opposite of what we had, having to go to work,
Right.
but still stressors all the same.
Mhm.
I'm seeing a lot of ads now where I've never seen them before on Facebook for mental health care, and you know, jump on and talk on Zoom to a psychologist, you know, that kind of thing. And as I look at shadow work, I'm wondering if again we aren't out there running in the front, although we've done this for millions of years, which is starting like our shadow work, our ways of handling some of this stuff. We're now sharing, people are picking up on.
Right.
And it seems like the journaling, I mean, we've been journaling since what, 1200s. And they just started now in psychology the last 10 years or so saying, we think that's a good idea.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like eat this herb, no, take this pill, no, take this potion. Oh no, now eat this herb, you know, kind of thing. We're going backwards in time, I think.
Right.
But while we're all doing this with our shadow work, I think it's really important to remember it's not just us that's changing.
Right. Exactly. And that's why I was saying, and it's important, like you were saying, going through last year, I had my biggest growth last year. I mean, that's the greatest thing for me personally that came out of 2020. Says I've been working from home, both my husband and I, since, well, it's been about a year now. Well, a year for Mike, almost a year. It'll be a year next month for me, but which is a blessing and chaos all in the same thing. But we are both high risk, so very thankful that that's an option. And we, help take care of my father-in-law, and he's in his late 70s and very high risk. So, it's worked out. But my oldest daughter works for Walmart, and she got COVID last year. She tested positive and she got COVID last July. Because she works, with the public. And we had to completely quarantine. And so I didn't work. Fiona couldn't go to daycare. I mean, because we were exposed, we all had to we could, So there was a period of time where I was on leave until she had a negative test, which you had to wait a couple weeks before you could get tested, and, the whole 14-day thing. So during that time, I really sat down with myself. I really did my studies. I really, really just did my work. And I have grown, and not just in that small window of time, but just last year in general, just everything that had gone on. And, relationships that have come and gone, just realizing the important things and what matters and what doesn't. And, being 34 and realizing I'm way too old for drama, way too old for drama. And I just, but it makes you, but that's part of the shadow work. It's like, listen, not my circus, not my monkeys. I just, but that's part of growing. You can't be on the caboose of the crazy train. Like, I'm jumping off whether it's moving or not, because I can't, I can't do it anymore. But that's the thing, like you said, projecting, and the thing is, people have to understand, just because on the surface we may look like we have it all together, everybody is going through something, and that's what you have to remember. Just because people are putting on a brave face and they have it all together, what may not seem like a big deal to you is someone else's personal health. Like, we all need to remember to be kind to one another. We don't know what the person standing next to us in the grocery store is going through. So at the end of the day, we need to be nice to each other. And doing part of that shadow work, that will, in my opinion, naturally come. Because whatever chip you have on your shoulder, when you do that, it's just naturally going to take care of things like that. is naturally going to take care of things like ego. It's naturally going to take care of things. You know what I mean? It's going to
think
be a
with that, you get to the point where you do the shadow work and you find that trauma isn't necessary. Like going back and reading your journals from 20 years ago, and you're like, I cannot believe I was so upset over
over
that
that.
stupid thing. And I didn't even remember it till I read it.
Or
So,
that, or that person.
right.
That's another thing, is like you understand sometimes that you give and give and give to someone, and then if they just can't give it back. That was a really hard lesson for me. And like my husband is like, you are notorious for like, you just always give people the benefit of the doubt, like no matter how many times they burn you. And I was like, I can't help it, which is kind of funny because I saw a Facebook post today about zodiac signs, and it's like, for mine, it was Aquarius, and it said, why are you always loyal to people that don't deserve it? And I was like,
Yeah. What's your sign? I guess it has come with my age that I am devil's advocate. So I look at the other side. I look at the liability, because that's kind of something of what I do in my accounting work. So my boss is always like, he has me play devil's advocate because I'm usually pretty good at telling what your liability is, what's going to happen if you don't do this, that, and the other. But I do find that as I've gotten older, I don't have the time. And it's not so much that it's the times like I don't like listening.
Right.
So it's
Oh,
like
I
done with that.
yeah, I found that out like last year. I grew that much at 34. I'm just like, yep, I figured that out quick. All right, that I don't have to worry about that in 20 years. I already got that taken care of. Like,
Let me know how that works out for you.
right. I'm just like, but also, a lot of my, like, you and I are very close, and we have the age gap. Angela and I are very close. Like, I surround myself with very mature, strong women. Those are my people. So, I mean, it's not hard to believe that I kind of run along those same lines of, growing, and the people that I serve. That's the thing, is you just have to surround yourself with those type of people. I have, I mean, you all know who you are, but I have a lot of great, friends in my life that if I need to, I can call up in a second and be like, oh man, I've had a crappy day. Like, you got a second? You've been, I've messaged you a couple times, like, you got a second?
I've messaged you a few times.
But that's what I'm saying, it's just, and that's part of shadow work too. You having a friend that can say, hey, am I like overreacting? Like, am I,
And that is an excellent form of shadow work, and people forget about that. Having that friend that will call you out on your crap.
Right.
And everybody needs somebody like that. And it's a respect thing. It really is. There's a few people that I don't have a problem with it. You call me out on it, I'm good.
Right.
Because I know it's done in care and love. I always tease about Jason on the show. Our wonderful executive producer. We've been friends for 20 years, and he's probably one of the longest friends I've ever had that will call me out. And I mean, he does not hesitate. He doesn't even mind his language. He calls me right out on it.
Right.
And that to me is shadow work that I still need to do, because trust me, it never stops. But it's nice to have that feedback from someone to say, hey, you really went over on that one.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, where do you think I did? Because sometimes I will ask, so I know what corrective measures, like, what made me do that? So why do you think I went over? And when you start going back through it, it's like, oh, I see. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I will.
And I've said this forever. I've always had this belief. I'm a firm believer that sometimes if you don't call people out, they don't realize that they're doing it. They may not realize that they're acting like a buffoon, or you know what I mean? Or they're being disrespectful, or even like their tone is like, you probably shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? It's like,
That is no truer than it ever is, especially as you get older. Sometimes we do lose our patience quicker.
mhm,
Um, I know at work a couple times I've been like, and I just took somebody right out. And it was like I really didn't need to do that.
right,
So it kind of reflects where you're at. But by the same token, having someone working with you with your shadow work and say, like, girl, that was a little, and that kind of sisterhood or brotherhood, I think opens us up easier to do shadow work.
right, exactly.
No one's pointing their finger saying, oh, you do that, but it's like, yes, you do that on occasion, or maybe that's something you need to look at, kind of thing. So I've always felt people do shadow work alone. I like to work with one other person that you really trust to tell you, hey, about, girl, I know a lot of my issues. I'm loud. I
Right,
can be very argumentative. I am stubborn. I'm a Taurus. I do not move. Um, and I already know this, and I'm very much an alpha female. So that brings its own baggage with
right,
it, because many times very strong women are not looked at as strong. We're looked at as being the B word. So, but I think having someone, because you portray that strong woman, CFO of a company, and I mean, $1 million
right,
company. So, yeah, I have to portray that strong person at work, that sometimes you feed into that
right,
and you do it when you don't need to do it. Sometimes the reins need to be very gently pulled back a little bit. And
exactly,
having a BFF working with you in shadow work can be the best thing, because they're there not to hurt you. They're there to help you. And
right,
it's that corrective and creative criticism that lets you know that you're a wonderful person. You're absolutely fabulous, but let's work on this a little bit. And once, like, anger is a big one. I used to get angry very quickly. I went off like Mount Vesuvius. I've learned to tame that down, and it's made me a happier person.
yeah,
So by someone saying to me, like, you really don't need to be that way.
right.
I said, oh, and I started backtracking on that, and I'm actually happier now. So
Well,
that shadow work.
and even if it's something like, hey, your friend calls you out, like, and then you go back and reflect on it privately, and you're like, oh, was I like that? Oh, maybe I was a little overboard. And then you reflect on it privately and you're like, how could I have, like, how could, like, going back to the journal prompt, how could I have done this in a healthier, constructive
Right.
way? You can go back to it. And of course, everyone has their own shadow work. So your friend is going to have their own shadow work. And at the end of the day, yes, it's an opinion. But if it's someone that you trust and you respect and you know well, and that knows you well, then obviously, they're a good
Yeah.
person to,
And we do this with our kids. We do shadow work with our children, and then we seem to stop as adults. It's like,
right.
sit there and think about what you did to your sister, and why I'm punishing you. I mean, I don't know of any mother of more than one child who has not said that at
Right.
one time or another, at
Right.
least once.
Well, and
And
think about it, even when you're talking about, you know, a person's tone, you know, that's a respect thing. And a tone can drive a conversation. A tone can destroy a relationship more than the words will, because a tone can drive the meaning of, you know what I mean? So
well,
it's
yeah,
like,
it's like email or texting. You never know exactly what a person's saying because you don't know the
exactly,
tone. You know,
exactly.
are they laughing at me or are they
Right.
laughing with me?
Are they being sarcastic? Right.
So you're right, that very much is that. But if you have that person that you trust now, and that's a big thing, you gotta
Big
have
thing.
trust. But usually when you're doing shadow work, you're working on you, and it's something that never stops. But when a person starts working on themselves,
Mhm.
others who have done shadow work can see the change in
Right.
that person. And that's very exciting to see that growth. But it's a growth that shadow work should almost be dark moon every dark moon.
It's a,
Um,
it's definitely a good place to do it. Absolutely. And
yeah,
also, in my opinion, I will say a little asterisk. If your friend that you trust has a ton of baggage that they need to really be working on themselves, that's the caveat. Like, okay, if they need to be focusing on their stuff, like, take it with a grain of salt, and then, listen to what they say. And like you say, go back and reflect on it on your own. But, there's always going to be, everyone's going to have, but if your friend is the conductor on the crazy train, take that, take that.
Look at that really close.
Right.
People think, and shadow work is now a big buzzword, that it's, oh, I did it and I'm good for the next 20 years or something.
Yeah.
And it's, once you really, really, really do it, then you realize this is an ongoing process, like brushing your teeth every day. And I think once you get into the act of it and you get comfortable with doing the shadow work, I've always liked to do it, like I said, on a dark moon, because that's Hecate, and the whole ambiance of a dark moon is the dark side. So it's kind of like, do reflective work, make a talisman to get, better at something, or, that kind of thing. Because I think people are forgetting, like it's a buzzword, like right now, everybody's doing it. So you're going to do it right now. And then a week from now or 2 weeks from now, the buzzword changes to, yoga position, and everybody's joining yoga position.
Right.
It's kind of that thing. But as a spiritual path, you are doing it on a daily basis. And once you get into that, doing it, and then you'll start to see, and it's funny because you'll start to see the world around you change, and the only change was you.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and like I said, it's not just about, and another thing that people have to understand, it's not just about emotional trauma or spiritual. It can be about money. How do you handle your money? Are you in debt and constantly,
Yeah, that
are
gives you a lot of stress right there.
yeah, exactly. Look at how you're handling your money. Are you, that's a huge thing. So it's like it's all encompassing. It's all facets of your life. So, it's really, if you have a stressful job, it's everything. How are your interactions with your children? How are your interactions with your spouse, with your coworkers? It's all with your friends, it's all over.
Well, the big buzzword before this was self-care. Everybody was talking about it when COVID first started, and
Right.
now we've gone into shadow work.
Mhm.
Self-care shadow work is part of self-care. I mean, you can't take care of yourself if you don't take care of that part of you.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking it's kind of funny. I'm waiting for the next wave to come along. It's going to be chanting in school, or everybody get a Ouija board and come home with it.
That would be interesting.
Wouldn't that be interesting? All these little
Mike
darlings
and
in school.
I have had our most active experiences in making a homemade Ouija board out of a pizza box and a shot glass for the planchette.
I don't even want to know. That just scares me right there. That's to be talked about around the campfire.
Right.
Goes around the campfire, stays around the campfire.
We're gonna have a paranormal experience topic show, because we've had enough crazy crap happen to
Yeah, it's interesting. The house that I moved to, we're having a few little issues here and there with door slamming, things coming off the wall. Yeah, so we're gonna have a little talk with, either they cough up their part of the rent or they're out.
This is another thing that I found interesting. Now, this is by an unknown author. So this says, if you haven't healed it, every time you think about a negative event from your past, your body produces the exact same chemicals in the body as when it happened. That means you relive the experience hundreds of times simply because you haven't let it go.
Yeah, it's funny. As you get older, smell is, of course, the most prolific scent and when you have that, you can smell something and it will take you back 50 years. It'll take you back 60 years in a heartbeat. It can also take you back to the trauma.
Exactly.
And if it's a certain smell, like I always know that my grandmother's around when I smell that Avon Skin So Soft. I mean, silicone gloves. She washed it,
Her skin so soft.
but she used the silicone glove on her hands. And that's the smell I remember as a child. And, I remember that. So I remember that, but then I remember her death. So I still deal with the trauma of her death. And it's because I don't feel like I dealt with it. I was only a child at the time when she died. So I really didn't deal with it well. But it's, you smell that, you smell, she's there. And then it's, and it's anybody who's passed. It's
Right.
my daughter, my oldest, came in last week, and we had a wonderful visit. Absolutely perfect. We cried at the airport, and we came home and we had a few drinks together, and just the mother-daughter thing. We really enjoyed it. But of course that leads to talk about people who have passed, and different things came up, and she flew back, and I was at work, and my boss says, I parked my car and I looked out because I heard some noise out in the parking lot, and there was a cardinal on the roof of my car. And then at lunch, my boss came in and said, "Do you know there's a cardinal playing around with your rear view mirror?" And I looked out, and it was a different cardinal. It was a brighter red. The first one had more dark on it, and this one was a much brighter red. So you could literally see they were two different cardinals. We talked about two people that were very, very close and dear to us about them passing. And evidently they came to say hi. We heard you. I guess they were happy. But you're dealing with, a memory, and it could be a very pleasant, but then you if they passed, especially as you get older, my goodness, it's not unusual for me to hear on a weekly basis that somebody I went to school with or somebody my age has passed, because in that group. So it's like you remember the person, then you remember the pain of their death.
Exactly.
And it's kind of funny with the shadow work, because that comes at you, and then it's like, okay, I need to deal with this. And sometimes everybody deals with grief completely differently. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. But every time you think of somebody that has passed, you're dealing again with that grief. And you're right, if you don't deal with it and get it over with, it's going to be coming back and coming back again.
Exactly.
So it's the shadow work is important. It's important to keep it up. And I'm just, we've gone from the witches now being a big thing, and that being a buzzword, to, shadow work is a buzzword, journaling is buzzword,
All
it's
the metaphysical stuff.
yeah, isn't it and crystals and
I mean, crystals have always been more, I think, more on the popular end of all the things personally, but still I feel like more people are it's selling more.
Yeah, it's funny because you can go, I mean, when we went to Casadega, the people that showed up were from all walks of life. I mean, my goodness, it just looked like a day at an outdoor event. It didn't look like the mystical Casadega. So we're starting to get so mainstream pretty soon. It's starting to look good now, because now you can walk into a metaphysical store without anybody going, "Oh, over there."
That's what I say. I mean, the thing with the mainstreaming, I mean, in my opinion, there is a silver lining, as long as they're not making fun or being disrespectful. There is a line that needs to be toted. But as long as they're not being disrespectful, I think in a way it's a positive, and there's a silver lining, because it is sort of normalizing. So I think so long as we are not necessarily vocal, but if there are at least some of us saying, "Oh yeah, that's all being a witch is," then maybe we won't be devil worshippers anymore. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, people talk about Charmed and Harry Potter, and I'm like, Charmed proved that we had jobs because
Right.
everybody in that group, one of them went to school,
And
you
was
had,
a writer, yeah.
right. So you had people getting up and going to work in the morning kind of thing. So that kind of normalized things a whole lot. Then you had, that you've got like the Vampire Diaries and all that kind of stuff going on.
Well,
So
even like Practical Magic, where she's a normal mom with
right.
kids going to school, and then
And
she
she's
opens
got
her
a store
shop.
in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
she's
even with
taking
Harry
on
Potter,
yeah,
because they were teaching it, it
right,
made it, and it allowed the children to embrace it as well as the adults. So the adults had to embrace it to understand, but they'd already been prepped with Charmed. So, I
right.
mean, yeah, and Practical Magic, and we're going from those kind of shows and showing, almost like Bewitched. She was a
Right.
normal housewife. She had to
Exactly.
wash the dishes and cook dinner and that kind of thing. I think it's every part of us now is being more exposed and more laid out for people to understand, because you would have never heard the word shadow work together 10
Right.
years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wouldn't exist.
Right.
Even journaling 20 years ago was not something that doctors told you to do. Okay, keep a diary. And, it was never considered
It
anything
was more, yeah, keeping a diary was more of like a teenagey, like, oh, this is my crush, or oh, this
teeny
girl at
bopper.
school,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Or like, or it people have been keeping diaries for hundreds of years, but it was more of a like a memoir type thing
Right.
of what's going on in their lives, almost like a historical aspect of it, but not in the sense of not for therapeutic or growth reasons. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Where we would keep one and say, this made me mad today.
Not for reflection your purposes. Um,
Right.
and this was another thing. So speaking of reflection, I just wanted to end with this because we're gonna wrap it up here. Unless you learn to face your own shadows, you will continue to see them in others because the world outside of you is only a reflection of the world inside of you. So I thought that was really good because
That's
you know how we say, it's not about you, it's them, when someone is like attacking you or someone has a problem with you, and often we'll say, no, it's not you, it's their issue is themselves. They're projecting, going back to that projecting. So I thought that was a really cool um quote that's pretty profound.
I'm
And the
thinking,
person that's doing that's going to be their shadow work to realize they're projecting, and that
right.
their issues is really the issues that they have with themselves.
It seems like all of our good practices, and I mean that in every sense of the way, our journaling, our shadow work, our earthing, and things of that nature are now becoming more and more every day, more and more like, oh yeah, I do that type
Right.
thing. And I think it's making people healthier
Hmm.
because we do this work. We know that it makes us healthier,
Right.
and everything's connected. So it's mind, body, and soul. So, if you're lacking in your shadow work, it's going to show up in being sick or not feeling good and
Oh yeah.
um, other parts of your life like that. So making this more a mundane thing, making this more of something, oh yeah, well, I journal. I've been journaling for years, kind of makes it, as new witches come in, it doesn't, it's not so like, oh, closed behind doors, and secretive, you've got to write a journal. And you're doing a journal for what?
Right.
Oh, I'm journaling. Oh, really? Me too, and they're not even on the same path, but it's
Right.
it's kind of normalizing it so that it was very hard years ago to be in this path because you had to fight everything.
Exactly.
As we're coming of age, I like to think of it where it's making it easier. Like, oh yeah, journal. Oh, save that jar. Don't throw it away, honey. I'm going to use it for
Right.
something.
Exactly.
I'm bad for that. I have a roommate who is pagan friendly, and I literally finished a jar and I put it in the dishwasher. And she said, "Oh, I know what you're going to use that for." And I was like, "Oh, but
Yep,
things
exactly.
becoming more mainstream, and I think that that's healing because those actions tend to dribble down into taking care of the earth kind of thing because ourselves, our planet, and we start looking at that as an overall picture. I think doing the shadow work, doing, the other work that we've always put out there, the journaling and, everything that we do, because we're healing ourselves and doing that. But I think it's going to be, I'm hoping once this pandemic thing has really gone over, that people have started doing this and started, healing themselves along this path. And I see our path growing. Every day I talk to people who, are jumping on the path, and
Yeah.
it's it's a lot because, we're talking healing and that's all we've ever talked about. It's not like, no, we don't want your children. They're spoiled. We can't heal them.
Right.
But
Well, and also like even if it's just meditating for 5 or 10 minutes to start out with, if you are busy, 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 start small and work your way up. Go walk in on a trail, go walk in the woods for 5 or 10 minutes. Just be in nature.
now,
Just
30 or 40 years ago, if you would have suggested that was a way to build your happiness is to go walk in the woods for a while, everybody would have looked at you like, oh,
right.
okay. And now you say you got 3 or 4 people behind you going, yeah, I do that all the time.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember being a kid, all I wanted to do was play in the woods. If I had woods, I was happy. That's all I needed.
And, so I'm like hoping that because of this pandemic that people are now starting to look at, we need to do our shadow work. I think people are finding out who they really are and what their priorities are now.
Yeah, what's important in life? I mean, are you really gonna take, you know, something so petty and give it so much weight in your life? Are you gonna like work on things so that you can really take hold on things that mean more,
Yeah,
because as we saw, of all the loss that was had, I mean, really, look at what's important in life. I mean,
wasting all your energy on things that are not important. It's really funny as you get older, you do a lot of reflecting. That's why a lot of us Crones write a lot of stuff. And, because we're now looking at our years and we're going back, what did I miss? What did I, and I just remember working so hard to be on this path, and it was extremely difficult, and it was hard to find teachers, and it was hard to find anybody to actually talk to, because it
right,
was you're a witch, they've got you flying on the broom with a green face and all that good stuff. But I think by normalizing a lot of our path, we're not just bringing it out, letting people use it. People are actually experiencing that it is a religion, that it is a calling, that it is real and defined, just like everything else. Because for a long time we were considered, oh, it's not a religion. Oh, that doesn't exist. So we're being, I think, justified, but I think we're also, people are starting to realize that, spirituality is a bigger subject, and
yes,
it takes a little bit more time to get into that. And I see a lot of growth in a lot of people who have had to readjust their, what is important, what is not important, lose 2 incomes. Now we're down to 1 income.
right.
What is important to us? Is it important to have the latest and greatest, or is it more important to put dinner on the table, kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think it just is going to take a collection of the masses under having an understanding that we as humans, our health relies on a holistic aspect. If we're lacking in one, we're going to be lacking in all because it's all intertwined. It's emotional, mental, and physical. If you're not emotionally and mentally stable, you're going to be a sick person. You are physically going to be, it's going to manifest. It's been proven science. There are studies. I mean, it will happen. You have to put the work in. And if you're not physically healthy, those are a lot of times the people with
Yes.
depression and anxiety. I mean, it's all intertwined. So it all coincides with each other. And it's going to take all of us realizing that as human beings, this is how our bodies are made up. And until we can have an understanding of that, you know,
I think too, this has proven to people that they spent more time at home, those that could, um, and they're realizing that maybe they don't need to work 90 hours a week. And I say that as a workaholic, and I'm not joking. I do at least 60 hours a week,
yeah.
which is not healthy. It is not.
I
Um,
do that with my job and then the 900,000 projects I do after my job every day.
I I have a lot of that where I do that. I mean, I'm
Because I
single.
don't know. See, and that's another thing in my shadow work. Sometimes I don't know how to say no to those 100,000 million projects,
Mhm.
and then I get burnt out. And that's another, it's just a thing. It's like, oh, I'm so exhausted all the time. But I mean, but I like what I do, but the girl is
Into
tired.
in America, where we push ourselves, we think it's great to work 90 hours a week
Right.
and
No,
push ourselves and work 6 or 7 days a week. But in retrospect, what have you lost?
right. It's so unhealthy.
And that's a really big shadow work to work on. And I am very, very guilty of that because as an accountant, I've worked those long hours during tax time, end of month, end of quarter, end of year, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, and I was doing it in this job, and I told my boss, I said, I'm working a lot of hours. He's like, yeah, I want to talk to you about that. That's not really healthy. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I've got someone who's doing a little bit, and I've got an ad in the paper for a full-time assistant. Um, but I'm realizing like literally I could drop over tomorrow at my age and it would not be anything out of the norm. And I'm sitting here going, well, how do I want, do I want to work till 9 or 10 o'clock every night? And it's like, no, I
Yeah.
don't. I'm starting to get out more. Listen to me at my age. I'm making more trips over to Jacksonville. Let's just
Yay.
put it up there.
Yay.
So, but I am getting out more, but I do see where that's a big shadow work thing to work on is, do we need to do 60, 70-hour weeks?
Right.
Do we need to take that time away from our children?
That's the thing is like, I've seen things on Facebook. It's like your kids are not going to remember their favorite TV episode. They're going to remember the adventures and going hiking and going to the park and things like that. It's like,
They remember the silliest things.
I know. And that's the thing though, is like we have to remember that as adults too, though. We are so caught up in making sure that our kids are well off, and that's fine, and that they're taken care of, and we completely neglect ourselves. And that's one thing we can't be okay for our kids if we're not okay for ourselves. We
And I
can't.
think that's a big shadow work for
Yes.
adults is taking that time for you and
Mhm.
your time together and then time with the children.
Exactly. It's a balance for sure. It
It's
took me a very long time to realize that. And I'm like, listen, mommy needs a minute. Like, and it's mommy time. Whether I'm binging my favorite Netflix show or I'm just chilling and listening to music or reading a book, it's just like, I need to chill out. Do not come in my room. Like, I just need a Zen moment or doing my yoga or you know what I mean? It's just, I need a minute.
and I think we've been brought up to believe that that is selfish
Right.
rather than, no, I need this time. And it used to be that back in the day, the women got together and had their bridge clubs and, things of
Right.
that nature. And that's what these were. I mean, it's kind of like our red tents. We get on there and we talk, and it doesn't matter what we're talking about. It's just we're all, getting this
Right.
all out in the open kind of therapy type thing. But the shadow work for parenting is really tough,
Well,
not
yeah, because people are so offended by everything, and then people are so judgmental about everything. And that's what I'm saying. Be kind to one another. You don't know who we are. Don't judge people. Don't take your judgy pants off. And, it's like, and people are so offended by everything. I mean, good Lord Almighty.
Yeah, and this is a generation that grew up on, Homer Simpson, and I'm sitting there going, really? And yeah, you just
Or
have to
Sesame
stop
Street.
and South Park. I mean, come on, you guys watch South Park. If you can watch that and not get offended, then
Right.
uh,
That's what I'm saying, Mr. Hanky. I mean,
but
but
I think it's the parenting is the most difficult with the shadow work. And I think that's sometimes where you almost need your partner, whoever your partner is with the children, to help you with that. Because I know I was a disciplinarian. I cracked the whip.
mhm,
And sometimes I would be very hard, and it would be because I've had a bad day and all this has gone wrong and I've got a million things on my brain. Um, and I noticed that my children are very far apart in age. So I noticed that I had a teenager and a baby and a toddler. You really want to go crazy? Try that combination, because
22, 12, and 4. All
mine are 14 years apart. So she's dating, he's teething. And you're up all night with a 2-year-old who's teething, and your 16-year-old walks through the door and it's like, you're grounded for life. For what? Breathing. You know, I I get it. I live that one.
But that's the thing, is like, going back to the point, we don't, as parents, cut ourselves enough slack. We have to just take a breather. And sometimes we have to realize, you know what? This isn't the end of the world. Whatever they're screwing up right now, I'm not going to lose my crap. I'm just, you know what I mean? I'm going to table that, because I'm not going to lose my crap right now. I'm just going to, you know what I mean? It's like, like,
That's when you sometimes need that partner, whether it's your domestic partner or your best girlfriend who has kids, and they can actually, it was great when you had multi-generational households,
right,
because you have that older adult and they could say, that ain't nothing, honey. You ain't gonna worry about that tomorrow.
right,
It's kind of like I used to tell my kids when they fell and got hurt, 20 years from now, you won't even remember it.
right.
But that's shadow work all the time. And it's really great to have that partner who will, and it's also, when you do shadow work, you've also got to build up, because you've got to look at what your good is, because if you're always working on that hard, bringing up all that yucky stuff, you've got to now balance it. Like we keep saying, everybody, it's all a balance. Now you've got to start looking, and that's where that partner can say, look, man, you washed, your kids are clean, their clothes are clean, they're fed, they're happy, boom, you got it,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And
Everything else doesn't matter, and you're good.
right, and trust me, I did kid thing, and I'm like, I could not do it now. You guys have got it, because nowadays things are so different from when I raised my kids, but it's still a lot of that. And how you treated your children, because now I do have some regrets. It's like, I wish I wouldn't have worked all those hours.
Mhm.
I should have done more. I was a very active parent. I was in Boy Scouts for 19 years, goodness gracious. My daughter's soccer coach for years. My oldest was in tap and ballet, so I did Marie Frank for years. So it was, but there were things that I missed because of, I need to work 70 hours a week to prove I'm an indispensable employee, which I didn't need to do because there was no reason behind it. And it's sad I had to wait till I was, this age to start really understanding that if I drop dead tomorrow, no one's going to care. You know what I mean? I mean, my boss is going to be, oh man, now we got to figure out how we're going to do this. But the world will not stop. My world. Oh no, but my world will. But and it's like,
Right. I understand what you mean.
your last day at work, you drop over dead from a heart attack. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, I have visions of that, because
That last day of work is not how you want to go out. You want to, like, go out with a bang, where you're like,
oh girl,
really-
I want to go out where Westboro Baptist Church comes to my funeral and bands it. I mean, that's how I'm going out. I'll just let y'all know.
That-
I got the party already planned.
oh man, that would be fun.
Oh yeah, cremation. And if you all don't drink and get drunk, I will be very disappointed and come back and haunt your asses. So that's how that's going. But no,
That's on record, so we gotta make sure it happens.
that's, you know, and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about when you sit back and, you know, when you, if I would have had a chance to do more shadow work back in the day, there would be things I would do a lot differently. And I can say that freely because I've done the work and now it's like, wow, you know, you reflect back, it's like, that wasn't the brightest move. So when people look at that shadow work, it's not a 5-minute job. It's not a 2-week job. It's an ongoing process. And back in the day, we didn't do that. And that I lost those years where I could have been working better on myself so that I could have done what I would have liked to have done. And, you know, it's, you're looking back now, you're going, wow, I wish I could have, you know, went back.
Well, and also, if you think about it, though, there was a point in time where it wasn't really okay, or it was frowned upon to talk about your feelings.
Yes.
Especially in men, and it's still frowned upon today. You
Well,
know?
that and the
So-
psychiatric aspects. If you were, there was a period of time where everybody saw a therapist and everybody had a therapist, and there were all these TV shows about it. But in real life, if you had a therapist, it was not like it was on TV.
Right.
You were
Had issues.
like you had a problem, like, oh my
Right.
God, you know,
Like,
type,
oh, did you hear she's in therapy? Like,
yeah, like, you know, you grew a third head or
and
something.
I still, and I, there's still a stigma with that people, I mean, it's more accepted, there's progress being made, but there's still a huge issue in this country with mental health. It's huge. There is progress, but there's not
Yes.
enough being,
There's not enough
enough.
education to the
Yeah.
masses for people to
Right.
understand that that is working on yourself. Okay. Believe it or not, understanding that you do have something that's deficit in a good 70.
There's not enough on a federal level for
Right.
mental health.
And
Unless you
people,
have private health insurance.
you don't get it. And
Right.
people don't understand that a lot of mental health issues are chemical imbalances.
Right.
So it's just like diabetic. You know, you got to get the balance with whatever chemicals you're lacking. You get that balance, and then it's like, oh, everything clicks. Just like if you're diabetic and you take your insulin or, you know, whatever you take, then your sugar's balanced and you feel great.
Right.
So I think that's another issue. It is getting much better where people are actually talking about it now.
Yes.
Even on
For
Facebook, we're
awareness.
seeing ads for that, you know, talk
Yeah.
to a counselor on Zoom, as that being my near and dear to my heart, what I have my degree in. It's very healthy to see that. And I really, as part of shadow work, if that's what you feel you need to do in your shadow work, you don't feel you can get past it, then there is nothing wrong in your spiritual path about calling up and going to see somebody, because that's making you better.
Oh,
So,
absolutely. There is nothing wrong with seeing a therapist.
right. It's like seeing your, you know, primary care.
Yeah.
It's along the same lines. And if it's getting more and more like that, because now
And it's
even,
healthy. It's healthy. I mean, you've got to take care of yourself. And
yeah,
back to, if you don't know you're doing something, you're not going to be aware. It's another perspective. It's from a professional. It's, you know, it's not a bad thing. It's not a
no,
bad
and it's starting to be talking about it, and now it's starting to become more aware, and people are actually, you know, doing it. But that's part of your shadow work. If you get to the point where you think that, you know, I'm not getting over something, or something's still bothering me and I've done everything, okay, then you need to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love to talk about the shadow work because I really missed doing it when I was in the craft much earlier, because like I said, it wasn't talked about. You talked about your dark side, but not so much as what to do with it.
Right.
I have a dark side. Now what do I do with it? You know? So this is really a great subject. And
Yep,
I
that was
guess
a lot of
everybody got a lot of views from us and a lot of different ways of looking at it. But I
Yeah.
really thought this was an important subject to bring up. And now with the COVID thing, some of the restrictions are being pulled back and people are starting to get out more. So now we need to really look at people are getting out that haven't been out for a while. So it's
Right,
uncomfortable for everybody. The
right.
masks are still a pain in the butt and, that kind of thing. But I think it's, we're getting there and we just need to keep that little layer of kindness because you don't know what's going on with somebody else.
Exactly, exactly. Well, it was a great show. We could go on and on as always. But thank you
Hours.
always for your support. And again, if you have any show topics that you want to hear about, any teas you want us to cover, hit us up on our Facebook page, Tea Time with Mother and Crone, and that's THYME, like the herb. You can private message us or email us at teatimemc@gmail.com. And of course, don't forget to go to our YouTube channel, Tea Time with Mother and Crone, and like and subscribe so you can get all those fun notifications every week.
And if you get any information, if you are having any festivals that are coming up in any part of the country, let us know. We'll get them on our Facebook page for you. We're based on the East Coast, but that doesn't mean that's where our audience is. So anybody having anything, please feel free to let us know. We'll make sure it gets on the Facebook page and make sure, we get it out a little bit more. We are having our main lustration is in Beltane weekend. It will be Zoomed, so everybody, keep an eyeball out for that one. I know that Jacksonville, Lady Angela is doing a regional in October, and let me tell you, it's going to be a lot of fun because we always have fun with Lady Angela. So that's one to look at, Compassion League. And if anybody else is having any, please send us some information because we'd love to get it up and
Well,
just let everybody know what you're doing.
exactly, exactly. Well,
Okay,
thank you so
guys.
much again and for all your support as always. And we will see you next week.
Next week, guys.
Bye.